Welcome back to CMO Weekly, where we dive into the boldest ideas and strategies shaping the future of business, tech, and investment. Today's guest is Dave Rademacher, co-founder of Oil Xcoin, a project that's bridging the gap between crypto and real-world assets by tokenizing oil and gas investments. With 20 years at BMW in global leadership roles, including global VP and regional leadership across EMEA and APAC, Dave brings deep expertise in scaling businesses, strategic growth, and connecting investors to new opportunities. At Oil Xcoin, he's at the forefront of bringing stability to crypto through tokenized energy assets and making oil and gas investments more accessible, more transparent, and blockchain-powered. Today, we're going to talk about how tokenization is changing the investment landscape, what crypto-backed commodities mean for the future of finance, and how Dave is applying his lessons from global corporate leadership into the fast-moving world of blockchain. Let's get into it. Dave, welcome to the show, man.
Well, that was an intro. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with that.
Nah, you did that all. You did that all. I want to go back,
Yeah.
to just like your background in general, right? When you were growing up, what was that goal? What was the goal? Where did you want to be, and what was your goal growing up?
Oh, damn. Okay. It's a couple of years ago to start off with.
Yeah, about like 7 years ago, right?
Time
Yeah,
flies.
yeah,
Time
yeah, yeah.
flies. No, I think I was somebody who always fascinated in digital types of things. I was one of those kids who was building the first computers in his garage kind of idea and selling them around the corner. So I think that's probably where the whole digital piece came into it. And the other aspect that you touched on in my profile there is the international piece. So I had a really international family as well. So the combo of those two things has sort of led me in all kinds of different directions.
Yeah, I find it fascinating when I interview people who have international backgrounds, right? What did that childhood, teach you and you bring into your personal life, but also your business world?
Well, I think it's horizon, right? There's no end to your horizon when you look at stuff, and just having family members, living all over the place. We had sort of one half is Irish, so we've got a lot of relatives
Yeah, 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 totally.
as the stereotype goes, and so people all over the place, and so inevitably you end up visiting them or they're there. So it just gives you, I think as a kid, it gives you a little bit of a different feeling of horizon, and then that takes you, I think, for most people on their business life as well. So I got into some larger corporations who are very global, and that fits together well with that because you tend to think globally and then you start to act globally, and you get the nuances of culture, so in languages and whatnot. So I think it's a lot of that childhood stuff that you see touched on that it goes along the way.
And what was your first introduction to crypto, Web3, right? When did you start hearing about it, and what was that experience like?
It was very early on, but now here's the but. But I didn't get into it because there's so many new innovations coming out all the time, and which horse do you pick to win at the races
Yeah.
with?
So what year was it when you started kind of learning about it?
Well, I would say my first touch points were probably in 2014, something along those lines. But I didn't get involved. I just knew about it and not deeply. And I think with anything, especially if it's something like crypto, where there is an investment component to it, at least speaking for myself, I find when you've got $10 in the game, then you pay more attention. And if you don't, it's interesting, but you don't really deal with it. So I probably started investing around 2017, something along those lines. And then it went from there.
And what did you see and what opportunities in 2017 that, started the wheels kind of oiling the chains, pun intended?
I think, without getting too much into the financial piece, is I realized it just wasn't another asset class. It's just not another bond or, ETF or it, but there's a disruptive nature to it. And that's something I think initially I was more looking at the blockchain side a little bit because I found that very interesting about the transparency and having an open ledger. And then through that, I started touching the crypto piece more and more. And then I think that was a clicking point when I figured out, hey, this is something has the potential to really radically change the financial system. Then it gets a lot more interesting, and then it's not just another asset class that you're buying a gold ETF or a Bitcoin ETF, but you figure out, hey, wait a second, this changes how banking can happen, and smart contracts allow you to do things much more quickly, much more transparently, so forth. So, it was a long love affair in the making, probably. It went
Yeah, I
from
mean,
one.
all good ideas, they're not baked overnight, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm curious, I would love for you to take me through the moment or the moments where the back of the napkin idea, right? You were talking about it with friends, right? When did it become, when did the idea come to you?
Yeah.
And then when did it really start hitting reality?
Yeah. So credit where credit is due. The original idea wasn't mine. founder of the company, so I'm a co-founder. He was in the renewables business actually, and was doing a lot of work in the US. And ironically went from the renewable side to oil and gas because it's more the other way around these days. So he had a very interesting network on that front. And then the pieces for me that started coming together were his idea, okay, let's bring crypto and oil and gas together. And I liked this is going back a little bit now, but I like the RWA principle. This was just sort of starting off, but so RWA being real world assets, right? Um, and the focus very early on was very clearly on financial products, and which, to be honest, are important, but I didn't find quite as interesting as the real world assets, i.e., taking commodities and other things and tokenizing them. So that was probably the click point where I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And then we have a very specific business model that we built up and put a lot of effort into doing that. So it became an interesting project too. So this wasn't my first startup, but I started seeing a lot of potential in it. And then there was the disruptive factor, the technology factor. So it was a bunch of things that all sort of came together to bring it along.
What lessons did you learn from your first startup? Because there's that stat, it's like 95% of first businesses like don't exist anymore, right? Yeah. What did you learn from that experience, and what did you take it in?
Yeah. So I worked for a couple of different, small companies, family-owned businesses, but a lot of time in corporate. So I'll take that. The move from corporate to startup is insane, right? It's day and night.
I can only imagine, right? I've only worked for companies under 25 people, so it's like I can't go the other way around.
Well,
Yeah.
that's it. And the last one I worked for had 130,000, right? So it's a completely different world. So I think there's a couple of points in there. Is first of all, you got to focus. Yeah, I mean, everybody's heard these things, but that's really something that I figured out pretty quickly. Is you generally have an idea, and then there's other ideas around this idea, and you've got to be dynamic, I think, and not stubborn and stick to one idea because there's new realizations and you test your market and your product market fit and so forth and so forth. But at the same point in time, I always had this sort of sticky note picture in my head that you can't fill your whole screen up with sticky notes, that you can't read anything anymore. So this whole principle of keeping focus on something, I think, is brutally important. I think another aspect is when you're founding with other individuals, that you need people who are able to act and decide in a vacuum. So what do I mean by that is, and here's corporate's the exact other side, there's processes, there's hierarchies, it's all basically, you're in little boxes. And I'm not saying that's bad, because you need that to manage the complexity of global organizations, right? But it's a whole different world. If you've got a startup and you're starting something from basically nothing, it's a big vacuum. So you've got to start creating these pieces in there. So those would be the two biggest points: is be careful who you found with, and
That's a big one too.
and because they've got to have that mentality, be able to act in a vacuum,
Yeah.
and focus.
Was there a time or a certain like moment in time where you realized like Oil Xcoin, this is a big thing. This is
Yeah.
not just an idea, right? That my co-founder had, right?
Yeah.
We're gaining steam.
Yeah, I think it's two pieces. It's the larger narrative. So people in crypto were always talking about narrative. So there was the one larger narrative that there were a number of big corrections around crypto in general. Bitcoin, doesn't matter what it was. So you could see this developing RWA movement coming in that direction, because people had lost money on things, and there were, and there's quite a few people in this space, but the ones who aren't generally tend to be skeptical. So I think that was a fit really well in that piece. And now if we fast forward a little bit more to, the US elections and the new administration, there's some very clear messages coming there as well, which fit very well to the principle of Oil Xcoin, right? The one being, like it or not, drill baby drill is the one side. So energy independence for the US, which positions the whole principle of oil and gas in a bit of a different situation than was in the past. And the other one about saying, the US wants to be very clear on crypto. And what the US does on the regulatory side and the banking side and the US dollar side has an impact all around the world. Doesn't matter where your company's based. At the end of the day, if the US has coughs, you get a cold out there. So I think that more recent development was the absolute confirmation of the thing we've been working on for a long period of time, is now we were coming into this position where the stars were aligning, without making that sound too dramatic.
Yeah, and the stars are aligning now. So what's next, right? For you guys, and what are you focused in on?
Bringing it out. So we're that's why we're here at Consensus as well. We're final stretch of the racehorse, and it's about, and this is pieces of startups as well. Is making sure all the ducks in a row, all your legal pieces are sorted out, and the back office, the front office, working with launch pads, KYC, AML. There's a big legal piece around this because we're a security, which is again a differentiating point to a lot of the other tokens out there. Beat them good or bad. Don't that's not what it's about. But we're definitely very clearly positioned as that we're straight, clean, and that's part of our USP. So that brings a lot of I don't want to say headaches because I don't want to make it negative, but it brings complexities, and it means you got to do your homework very intensively. And that's where we're in the final crunch now to make sure that that's all going to sort out.
And when you look to the future for the next like year or two, what does success look like?
What's a success?
Success.
Okay. There's a personal one, and there's a business one. Yeah. So I'll say the business one is, we'd like to be, an up and coming player on the market because we think we've got a very, very interesting product, and we've had a lot of very, very positive discussions, and so we think we can actually. I don't want to say disrupt is a very big word, but I think we can provide an interesting option that's not there yet. We're definitely not going to be the last one. There's no questions about it, but I think that's super interesting. So if we time this right, it looks very, very good. I think we've got very good chances to make some interesting waves out there.
Yeah.
On the private side, well, this has come back to your question a little bit around starting up startups. So it's not good for the work-life balance at all. And it's been incredibly intensive. So I'd like to be in a situation where you never want to be bored in life, but it'd be nice after this very intensive time frame to be able to, go down a gear, not 5 gears, but a gear.
Totally. I totally get that with the start of life. And whether I want to put you in the seat, right? Whether there's an 18-year-old listening to this or a billionaire,
Yeah.
right? What is the 1 minute pitch or elevator pitch?
Oh,
Okay. On why this is a good investment.
so
But it's not financial advice.
no, yeah, no, of course, it never is. But the aspect that I would look at it is to say, hey, if you haven't, and I'll go from that side because there's different personas out there, right? And say you're not in the crypto space yet, but you hear a lot about it. You've got some friends who made money, you've got some friends who lost money, and that would be my pitch to say, look, if you look at getting into this space, then don't put a lot of money in. This is probably contrary in what I'm saying right now. Don't put a lot of money in there, but get your feet wet because, as I said way earlier on, with myself included, go in with a couple of bucks. And then you learn how it works. And then you start to figure out, okay, that's a good idea. That's not a bad idea. You're probably going to lose 9 of those dollars, but hopefully you got a buck left over to make 12. And I think that would be my advice is, look at the market, see what's out there. I think we're an interesting option, but we're an option. We're not the only one with any stretch of imagination. And then try it out. And then, you figure it out. And I would never go all in on the new meme coin based on whoever, because it's gambling. I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just gambling. And I think there's a lot of options out there, us included, that if you do, your research, then you can reduce that risk profile of going into something and still have hopefully an interesting upside. And then, as I said, then you start to look at it, you start to understand it better, and then you can make informed decisions. So go in small, and learn.
Last question I would ask is, if you were to bring it back to your 21-year-old self, right? What piece of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, there's an interesting one. I think retrospectively for my personality type, I should have left big corporate a little bit earlier. I learned loads and loads, and I would never, no regrets in any way, shape, or form. It made me part of the person I am now. And interestingly, my corporate background, I think, is something that a lot of people in the crypto space don't have. So it's actually very interesting from that perspective. But I probably could have left a little bit earlier. And knowing what I know now about the crypto space and the blockchain space, I should have not just looked at this when I was, in 2013. And it's not about making money. It's just, the earlier you are in groundbreaking, disruptive things like this, the bigger an impact you can make and the more things you can change. And you're not paying catch up or, optimization, but you make a much bigger dent in the whole thing. So I would have said, just take that, focus on that, because you can give a big long answer is corporate piece, do it, learn it, understand how big organizations work. Take the international global pieces of that, understand why audits are important because you've got to do that stuff. understand why processes are important, understands where KPIs are important. But then when your learning curve starts to flatten up, then it's probably a good idea that you start moving on before you get too comfortable in that corporate nest.
Absolutely. That's great advice, though. I would say the same thing to most young people who are ambitious. Let's hit the quick question round, though. All right. Person you'd most want to sit down to dinner with, dead or alive?
Jurgen Klopp. I don't know if that's too specific. He's a football coach.
Yeah. Liverpool. He was Liverpool.
Yeah, exactly. But Dortmund before that, he's just somebody who I've always admired as a leader. He's a super interesting guy, great sense of humor. I've never met him, so this is just based on what I've seen and heard of him, and now he does press conferences and stuff like that. But he had this, I think, and continues to have this amazing ability to take young, perhaps rough diamonds and really make them overperform.
Oh yeah, I've heard his story before. I'm not a huge football fan, but I've heard that people have given that answer before.
Have they?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
then,
one or
then it's
two.
not a unique one.
One or two.
Well, you know what? It's but that goes to show the guy is, he's a very impressive individual. And maybe I can say something I don't know if the others said is, I think humor is a very important part of business. It's not about not taking business serious, but we all spend so much time working in life, and if you can laugh along the way, it's a great motivator for yourself and for other people. And that's what I've always, I said never met him, but what I've always observed is he's got this amazing ability also, even in stressful situations, be it with journalists or whatever, to crack some great jokes, and it just changes the atmosphere completely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Favorite city in the world?
I got lots of favorite cities in the world for different reasons, right?
Give me your top two.
Okay, top two. I would say Bangkok and Tokyo.
Favorite movie?
I like Quentin Tarantino a lot. Usual Suspects was a very, very good one.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Is it okay to sleep with socks on?
No, it's okay. I prefer not, but I wouldn't have any problem if somebody had mine.
One thing people don't understand about your job is?
Oh, just about everything. I got to give you a
That's why you
blacklist.
come on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Very difficult to
What's the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
be patient.
Best advice.
Don't be so patient.
And last question, in 10 years from now, where can we catch you?
Bangkok and Tokyo.
There you go. Dave, thanks so much for coming on, man. That was great. Appreciate it.